Hello, everybody. This is Kwame Sarfo-Mensah, your host for another episode of Identity Talk for Educators Live. And we are out here in the motherland. So this is going to be the first one in the motherland. And we have a special guest. This brother I've been following in recent months on Instagram, and he's just doing fantastic work in his native Nigeria. So shout out to Niger. Niger's in the building. And we have here,
we here.
yes, yes, my Nigerian brother. So there's always this talk about, Ghanaians and Nigerians. They don't get along, but at the end of the day, we're brothers.
Yeah,
The
we
only thing
are.
they want to clarify here is the jollof rice is the best thing in Ghana.
You just had to go there. You just had to go there.
But that's another conversation for another day. But here we're talking education and technology. So we have here David Obianyor, who is an educator here in Nigeria, a technology integrational specialist. So he specializes in educational technology and tries to infuse it in a way that creates a positive classroom climate. So we're going to talk about how he does that in his classroom, and also some of the other initiatives that he's doing in Nigeria and beyond, and what we can do as educators to improve education on the continent. So David, my brother, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I must say that I'm really impressed. You really did your research on me. Like when I saw something you wrote about me, I'm like, wow, we didn't even have a conversation yet, and you had everything spot on. So big ups to you. I admire what you do too, and I'm glad to be here.
I appreciate it. I mean, it's my job. If I'm going to invite people onto the show, I got to do my research. That's part of the work, but I appreciate that. But let's get right into it. So we all know you're from Nigeria.
Yes, sir.
And for those who do not live on the continent, just share a little bit about your childhood, your early beginnings, and what led you into this field of education.
Okay, so I grew up in Nigeria, Lagos, Nigeria, had my primary education here, and I actually attended a private primary school. At the time, public primary schools were really not the go-to places at the time because of quality and things, but I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yes.
Then after that, I went into secondary. It was funded by the government. At that time, it wasn't as bad as it is today, because today people still have to go to private. But the scourge hadn't gotten to secondary while I was in primary. But as it is now, even up to the university, you have to opt for private universities if you want to get anything qualitative. So after my university education, I had to serve. There's something we do called the NYSA in Nigeria, where you have to serve the government for 1 year.
Okay.
And I felt at that point, let me just go back to my alma mater. So I went back to my primary school to serve, not necessarily as a teacher, but just to serve in the environment and to give back. And then I realized that there were some things that were happening. They had introduced a lot of new stuff that weren't there in my time, technology and some other methodologies of teaching. But I felt that some things could be done differently. I mean, I was younger than most of the people there, so I felt they were not maximizing the use of technology in the school. And then I applied to be a teacher, just with the sole aim of showing things that could be done with technology in the classroom. And that's how I landed in the educational space. I didn't even study education in the university.
So I didn't tell you this, but I actually spent some of my schooling in Ghana. So this was about 20 years ago. So I was there during my secondary years. So for those who are familiar with the school systems in Ghana and also Nigeria, we followed the British system. So the way that we categorize classes, it's based on how the British do it. And that's just stemming from colonialism and other factors. But anyway, I was there from forms 1 through 3, and I
Okay.
took, at the time, I'm not sure if they do it still, but I took the BCE. So that's the Basic Education Certificate Examination. That's what you usually take before you enter senior secondary school. So that's
in the secondary.
So that's basically high school level.
Yeah.
For those who aren't familiar. And at the time, now mind you, I grew up in the United States. So when I came to Ghana, I was shell-shocked at first because the level of education, the rigor was at a much higher level than what I experienced in the United States. The work was harder. I actually had to study in order to pass my test. And it felt like college. So imagine being ages 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, and you're studying for a final exam in college. That's what it was like for me at that age.
I can imagine.
Yes, very challenging. But what I appreciated about the experience was the fact that everybody in my class was just as motivated to succeed. It was a friendly competition. Everybody wanted to get the good grades.
Yeah.
You know, there was just this motivation that everybody had in terms of succeeding. Everybody wanted to be on top of the other. And that wasn't something
And it was still healthy.
Yeah, it wasn't healthy. It was definitely a lot of pressure because, with our cultures, right, education is a high priority. So our parents, our families, they take it very seriously and they expect
it's almost a hustle.
All times, which could be great, but could also be damaging if it's done too excessively. But we could talk. We'll talk more about that. But I just wanted to share that. Now,
I feel you.
Yeah. Now in Nigeria, you shared a little bit about the state of education in the country. So, as of right now, how would you describe the landscape there educationally, maybe compared to other nations in the continent? What's it like out there?
Okay, if I'm going to compare it, put it at par with other countries in Africa, I would say we're not doing so poorly. But in terms of let me just make it indigenous to Nigeria, I feel that there's a lot that could still be done. I think we're plagued. I think the crux of the matter is basically on poorly funded schools. Nigerian schools are poorly funded. There's overcrowding. The poor funding leads to poor infrastructures. There's some projects I've worked on, which I think we'll talk about just based on the states of things I have seen. Like I said, I attended a private school. So right now in this part of the world, if you don't have the wherewithal to pay for private schools for your children, or you don't have the money to go to private schools in general, you just may be at a disadvantage in terms of measuring up to what's happening, even in other countries in Africa, even in other countries that are doing good in Africa. So comparing us with other countries in Africa, I may not be able to weigh in because really I haven't really gone to lots of other countries in Africa, but I know that Ghana, countries like Ghana, South Africa, and some other countries that I wouldn't even want to just go into all of that now, are doing way better than we are. But in Nigeria, I think we're plagued with poor funding and just it's a travesty. The educational system here is just a travesty.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because if you ask anybody outside of Africa, US, UK, other countries and continents, they'll say, well, Nigerians, and there's data that actually suggests this, at least in the US, there was one study that showed that Nigerians were the most educated immigrants coming into United States, Nigerians.
Wow.
And so, when I saw it, I wasn't too surprised because I have a lot of Nigerian friends. And I know about how the culture is, whether you're Yoruba with your Igbo, like I know like how important education is, to the culture.
Yes.
So
It
when I
is.
saw that, I was like, okay, that makes sense. But then here you are saying that the schools are in a dire state and they're in need of renovation, they're in need of upgrading, and the overcrowding of the schools is also an alarming issue. So when I hear this, but then on the other end of the spectrum, you have so many Nigerians with multiple degrees and they're just highly educated. Some people probably scratch their head and think that's not what my impression was. So
yeah, we value education so much so that we would do whatever we can to get qualitative education, regardless of what it costs. I mean, there are parents who go hungry just to make sure that their children are in the best schools or are in good schools.
yes.
Private schools in Nigeria would still provide you that high qualitative education, but the public schools are my concern right now. I feel quality education should be a right of every child, not just those who are privileged, but every child should easily have access to quality education. So that's why I feel the bane of this whole thing rests upon public schools.
And I think this situation is a common one, not just in Nigeria, but in other countries on the continent. Even in Ethiopia, a lot of these similar issues are taking place there. So my question is, what can be done in Nigeria to make education more equitable for children in the country and also for parents as far as financially?
Okay, I know that abroad, lot people go to school for free, and when you compare it to people who have traveled out from Nigeria who attend these free schools, the difference between what happens in the public schools abroad and maybe in the private schools, the gap isn't so wide as it is here. So I think stakeholders in this part of the country, first of all, the people who are put in place in the Ministry of Education from the bottom to the top need to be well vested in the needs of the society, because I think it starts from up there before anything can be done in the public schools. I mean, private people have investors and all that, but the public schools are in dire states. And I believe that when we have the right people who apportion the right amount of money in their budgets to education, I mean, teachers are even supposed to be paid. I really don't get how it is, but that again is a discussion for another day.
Yes.
Teachers are not motivated. Teachers are really not motivated because of the salaries they receive. But yeah, I know people will say, yeah, it's a worldwide phenomenon. But when we still compare in this part of the world, a teacher needs to always think about survival first before you think about being creative in the classroom. So these are things that I think should be addressed. Proper funding, provision of infrastructure in the classroom, and motivation, teacher training, teacher development. All these things will water down to what's being done. It will all cascade into what's being done in the classroom and the quality of education we would have in the country.
And that's an excellent point, because even though you have issues of teacher attrition, teacher turnover, low salaries, and all these issues you've mentioned, it's all relative. So having a low salary in the UK or the US is nothing compared to having a low salary in a developing country in Africa. And you can take your pick, but it's all relative. So I'm glad you made that point. Let's talk a little bit about the work that you're doing around infusing technology into the classroom, because this is something that has become a huge phenomenon, not just in Africa, but also other parts of the world.
Worldwide.
So I want to know, in Nigeria, what are some initiatives that have been done or you feel need to be done to increase computer literacy and technology integration in primary and secondary schools?
Okay, judging from where I've been, and this is actually something that has basis because I'm actually teaching in my alma mater. So I know how far we've come from what it used to be to where it is now and the potential it has. So I would say, sadly, that this is only something that is prevalent in private schools for now. Fingers crossed, it spreads, it
Yes.
permeates around every other sphere. But for now, in private schools, I think everyone is stepping their game up. We have devices in the classroom, we have smart boards and smart TVs that are exposing our children, our students, and making us not only learn about the world, but we're also learning with the world. And for me, I made it a point of duty to develop myself in a way that I could also train my colleagues to always look beyond the big picture and strive for more. I mean, at some point, I'm going to have to invite you into my classroom to talk to my children, to talk to my students, and talk to my colleagues.
Yeah.
That's what I have in mind. So this is the vision that I just hope every teacher or most teachers can peek into and still leave from my page. Technology is here, it abounds, it's not going anywhere. So every day we see changes, and we have a system in our private schools where we talk to the management and they listen. They send some of us for trainings abroad and outside the whole sphere in Nigeria here. So whatever it is we see, we come back, we introduce. So now we're at the stage where we have devices in the classroom. The children have their own ratio, 1-to-1, every child to one device, back from where we had groups using only one computer. Every child has a device now. We have a smart board that can connect us to the world. So basically, I think private schools are doing their bits. They're doing their bits, and they're pitching in and trying to raise the level of education here.
All right. And then you mentioned just the access to technology. So having the computers and having access to all these other technological tools. Usually when you hear about this in Africa, usually you hear about it in international schools, but you don't hear it as much in the local schools, like the public schools and the private schools that are based originally in the country. So I guess my question is, how have you all been able to bring all the technology into the schools? Because I know it wasn't an easy task. It had to require some work, maybe some financial assistance, donations from the community and beyond. So how were you able to accomplish that? Because I think that's something that a lot of school leaders on the continent would love to get some information about so they can also do the same.
Okay, I really am not in management, so I really do not know the nitty-gritty. I don't know the intricacies, but I know that we always begin with the end in mind based on what it is we want to achieve. So we're always willing to sacrifice. I would say that a chunk of it comes from our school fees. A chunk of it comes from our school fees. And where I work, our management is very sensitive to what's happening in the country and outside the country.
Yes.
So a little sacrifice doesn't hurt. A little sacrifice from each member of the management and the board never hurts. And I know that the majority of the inflow of tools into our classroom come from decisions made on the board, cutting down on some other place in the bid to increase what can come into the classroom. Even if we have to cut down the use of markers, cut down the use of exercise books just to justify the new tools that are coming into the classroom. That's a huge part of what we do at our school.
All right. That's awesome. And I know, staying on technology, so you're also the Classdojo ambassador. And I'm a Classdojo fan. So Classdojo is a very popular tool, especially in the US. So to have it brought to Africa, that's a big thing, because now you're talking about digital divide. you're not connecting to other parts of the world through the technology. So tell us about your role as the ambassador of Africa for Classdojo, which is an incredible tool that I recommend to any educator. I've used it. It's great for connecting with parents and other community members in school.
Okay, let me just say this. I became an ambassador at a very odd time. There's usually a time when you can apply for ambassadorship.
Yes.
It's a window that's open and closes. But I came in contact with this tool and I went ham with it. Like, the people at Classdojo company were talking about me in their offices during the weekends and would want to connect and say, look, we haven't seen this thing being used. We haven't seen somebody have so much drive with our app like the way you're doing down in Africa. And there's this impression that people have about Nigerians being scammers and things like that.
And 419 and all that.
Teachers from the US were really circumspect and weary about connecting with me, but they wanted to, but the whole Nigerian factor kept holding them back. And then one person took a chance on me. One lady, Stacy Weber in the US, took a chance on me, and we decided to take on this project to not only use Classdojo in my classroom in the private school, but take it to the public school where they didn't even have computers or anything or any access to anything. And that was when I became an ambassador. The company reached out to me and said, look, you can't just be a mentor alone. You have to be an ambassador. I was going around schools outside of my school. I shared with my colleagues, obviously. We have 5 branches of our school. Every school was using Classdojo. And then I took it upon myself. I felt it was good news in Nigeria. So I went to different states. I went to Kenya. I went to Senegal. Talked about this at the INSEA conference. And I just feel that Classdojo is something that I want to see in every classroom in Africa. So that is my dream as the ambassador for Classdojo.
Oh, man. And that would be great because it's such a phenomenal tool. And of course, if you're in the US and you're a teacher, you're very familiar with it, but that's not the case in other parts of the world. So it's great to hear that it's starting to spread beyond North America and it's going to other parts of the world. You know, that's very important. So how has the use of Classdojo impacted the classroom climate for you? How's it impacted the students?
Now, usually in public schools at the time, all those have changed now. In public schools, there was physical discipline. There was like corporal punishment. You could beat children and things like that.
Oh, I know.
In public schools at the time, all that has stopped now with enlightenment from the government. So basically, classroom management was a big thing to me, and it's a big thing for our schools. So I kept thinking, how could we make it better? How could we make it fun? How could we reward children for being good, not necessarily punishing children for being bad, but making children feel the need to be caught doing good instead of being reprimanded for doing something they shouldn't. Right. So when I saw Classdojo, even though at the time I came in contact with it, it was basically just a communication app and things like that. I remember having a conversation with one of the executives there, and I said, I think we should add songs to Classdojo, something that could help in the classroom environment. And not too long, there was a toolkit, not like it was my idea, but I think I just got exposed to that and realized that, okay, there's actually music. It's not just an app that manages behavior by rewarding and punishing. It also presents other avenues for children to feel that they're in a calm environment and that they shouldn't alter the environment. So for me, it has modified my children's behavior positively. My children are more proactive because they want to be caught doing good things. My children, the students in my class, now believe that you could be rewarded not just for academics, but for being thoughtful, for being kind, that there's something in it for them. So basically, it has modified behavior positively in my classroom.
Awesome. And I know with Classdojo, and you know this as well, being an ambassador, there's also a messaging system for parents so they can keep track of their child's progress academically and behaviorally. Yeah. So how have parents received this tool? What has been the reaction and feedback from parents?
Just like the children, the parents they are wowed. And it now places me on a pedestal in comparison to other teachers who don't use this tool yet.
Right.
So it looks like, there's David here who's doing all this and giving us access and giving us a way to come into the classroom without even intruding. He just brings us closer. So now I don't even have to have a parent's phone number or a WhatsApp number to communicate with the parents. Classdojo presents that. And one wonderful thing about the app is that it helps parents track the progress of their children. So on days of conferencing, teacher conferencing, you don't have to start saying all these things. You're just spending time thinking of solutions because the parents already know that, oh, my child constantly receives, I receive notification from my child not completing his homework or finishing in time. So I already know what my child is. All I'm coming to discuss is solutions. So the parents have received this app wholeheartedly.
All right, and that's great. And I think in order for technology to continue to spread in Nigeria and other countries, we have to find ways to not only help public schools get access to technology, but also find ways to help parents and families get access to technology, because some of the students are coming from homes where they may not have a computer.
True.
Or maybe even a phone, because I know Classdojo, you could also use your smartphone in order to communicate with teachers.
Yes, so you can.
We have to continue to grow technology.
Spread the gospel.
Spread it elsewhere, all over, not just in the schools, but also in our homes as well.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So we've talked a lot about just growing technology in Nigeria and parts of Africa. But what I want to know is, you have a lot of projects going on in your country. Are there any other projects and initiatives that are coming up in 2020 or in the near future that you'd like to share?
Yeah, okay. Personal project, I hope to get married this year. But no, I know we're talking about education. So I'm working with, I'm the co-founder of this teachers group. I and a lady called Idara Omosen, and we founded this group called this brand called Teachers Idara and David. And this, at least 2,500 teachers in the public school, give them the basic tools, like a toolkit for that we think every teacher who strives to stand out in the profession should have. So apart from projects like funding some schools, raising money to fund schools, refurbish their toilets, provide projectors and power generators for schools, we believe that teachers can give what they don't have. They can't give what they do not have. So we're also going to be hosting training sessions. I had one yesterday where I went and talked about how to effectively create a lesson plan to teachers who still write their lesson plan. So really, I think teacher development is key. And that is something that Idara and I are big on. So those are projects, educate and bring up about 2,500 teachers at the list in this year.
Oof. Very ambitious goal, but I love it. We have to support each other as teachers. Yeah. We have to do it.
Yeah, we do.
But as we're wrapping up, first off, David, I want to thank you for being on the show. This was something that I've been looking forward to for a long time, so I'm glad that we're finally able to connect, brother. And before you leave, could you just share your social media information so that people can follow you online? All this great work you're doing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. I also look forward to this for a long time now. You can find me on Instagram at Obianyor David. That is at OBIANYORDAV. And on Facebook, my name is David Obianyor, and the brand and my partner's brand is Teachers Idara and David. So on Instagram, my personal account is at Obianyor David, and my brand where teachers can work with, the brand I co-founded, is at Teachers Idara and David. Teachers Idara and David. Idara is IDARA. So Teachers Idara and David. So you can find me there. And on LinkedIn, of course, if you got something for me, you want to work with me, I'm on LinkedIn to David Obianyor.
Okay, people, you've heard it from the man himself. Let's connect with the brother. Let's make Africa great again. Let's do it. That's how we're going to build. So on that note, on behalf of David.
Yes, sir.
Yes. On behalf of David, this is Kwame Sarfo-Mensah signing off. Have a good day, have a good night, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. And we will do this again another time. Peace.